If you didn't know already, we have a TLDR Twitter account, and we're running a knockout competition for who should be the hypothetical Prime Minister out of a bunch of British icons. Check out all of the latest news and explainers, as well as casting your vote, by following @TLDR News UK. So on Sunday, the Conservatives kicked off their annual conference in Manchester, and as a part of it, Prime Minister Boris Johnson went on the Andrew Marr show. As you might expect, Marr asked Johnson some questions about the current supply shortage in the UK. Now, usually when voters are running out of food and fuel, you'd expect the Prime Minister to be doing everything he can to get shelves stocked as soon as possible. Both because shortages aren't great for the economy, and because shortages aren't usually good for governments politically. However, that wasn't what Johnson went for. Instead, he argued that the current disruption was a necessary step on the road to better wages for workers, and that the UK couldn't solve this problem by returning to uncontrolled immigration, as well as claiming that this was something that the British people voted for back in the 2016 Brexit referendum.
When people voted for change in 2016, and when people voted for change again in 2019, as they did, they voted for the end of a broken model of the UK economy that relied on low wages and low skill and chronic low productivity. And we're moving away from that. We're investing massively in skills. We're investing massively in infrastructure. We're going to be talking in a minute
towards bluster.
So if people voted for these shortages, then how is Johnson trying to make them seem like a good thing? Well, let's explain what Johnson's claiming right now. What to make of Johnson's argument? Well, before we get into it, we've got to understand the difference between nominal value and real value. Basically, whether wages go up depends on these two things: the nominal increase in wages and the nominal increase in prices, otherwise known as inflation. Basically, if your wages go up from £30,000 to £33,000, that represents a 10% increase in nominal wages, which sounds great. However, if the price of all of the things you buy, your food, your energy, your water, goes up by 20% in the same time period, then clearly you're actually poorer than you were before, because you can't buy as many goods as you previously could. Here we'd say that while your nominal wages are up 10%, your real wages actually went down. Anyway, hopefully you get the point. Whether your real wages go up depends on both the number on your paycheck and the price of the goods you buy. The final thing to note here is that these two things aren't completely independent. If the wages of HGV drivers go up, then in general, this will probably also increase the actual price of goods, like fuel. If retailers have to pay more to cover the wage rise, then they'll likely also increase their prices, meaning in effect, a higher rate of inflation. Now, this isn't always the case. Some jobs have more of an effect on inflation than others. HGV drivers have a pretty big effect on inflation because they're transporting stuff that everyone buys, like food and fuel, and they're not easily replaceable, as we're currently seeing. So back to Johnson's argument. Like all political arguments, it has an element of truth to it. First, some Brexiteers did make the argument that EU immigration was suppressing UK wages and productivity. And secondly, there are plausibly some cases where this has happened. For example, productivity in the construction industry has lagged behind the rest of the UK for years now. This has basically meant that the construction industry is doing less per hour than other sectors in the UK. Now, it's possible that this is partly due to the fact that UK construction firms have had permanent access to low-paid immigrant labour from the EU, and this has discouraged them from investing in productive technology. Now, this is in the interest of businesses in the short term, because they don't have to pay the upfront costs for technologies, say computer imaging software. But in the long term, that imaging software would save them money and improve productivity. The argument goes then that if you can cut off the supply of flexible, cheap immigrant labour, then you force companies to invest, thereby improving productivity and wages. So that's the logic behind Johnson's argument. Nonetheless, there are a few things we need to say here. The claim that immigration suppresses wages for low-skilled workers is something that's actually debated among academics, and isn't necessarily true. Secondly, this probably isn't the best way for the government to go about improving the wages for the lowest paid. While the shortage of HGV drivers might improve drivers' wages, it also increases inflation because, as we explained earlier, HGV drivers' wages have an outside impact on the cost of certain goods like food and fuel. This means higher food and fuel prices for everyone, and in some cases, no food or fuel at all. This means that in real terms, the wages of all other low-paid workers are going to actually fall because they have to pay more for these goods. If you actually wanted to increase real wages across the board, instead of telling people to temporarily retrain as HGV drivers, you'd probably be better off just increasing the minimum wage and taking on some immigrant HGV drivers. This would give you the real wage increases for the lowest paid without the food and fuel shortages. Nonetheless, Johnson feels confident about his current strategy, presumably because, according to him, real wages are rising. And this is something that Ma challenged during the interview with Johnson.
Because what you're also seeing is finally growth in wages. After more than 10 years of flatlining, what you're seeing is people on low incomes being paid more. And by the way, here's an example of levelling up.
Can I come directly to that? Because you said something that isn't true, I'm afraid.
Let me finish this point.
You said something that isn't true about wages.
The wages are growing.
The Office of National Statistics, the ONS, your own body, in the last reporting period, the 3 months running through to July, says that wages are not keeping pace with inflation. So in other words, in real terms, over the last 3 months, wages have gone down, not up. You're shaking your head, but these are ONS, these are government figures.
Wages are finally going up for the low paid, and they're going up faster, by the way, than they are for those on high incomes, and about time too.
Well, that's not what the numbers show.
No, that is what the numbers show.
Now, it's not clear what ONS data Ma was referring to here, because the latest ONS data from September 2021 says that in real terms, wages are indeed rising. However, those figures are slightly misleading for two reasons. Firstly, you'd always expect pay to increase post-pandemic because it's been a year of unusually slow economic activity. Secondly, that figure is inflated by the fact that many low-income workers have been made redundant, which just increases the average. The real figure, according to ONS analysis from July, is probably somewhere between 3.4 and 4.6%. This would still be higher than inflation though, which is currently around 3%, representing a real rise in wages of about 0.39 to 1.55%. This is spread pretty evenly across the board as well. In fact, the latest ONS figures suggest that the lowest paid have actually enjoyed a higher percentage increase than the higher paid over the last couple of years. So real wages are increasing by something like 1% once you flesh out all the numbers, and this is pretty good. Any increase in real wages means that people are getting richer. But the worry for the government will be whether this can last, or whether inflation will eventually overtake wages once again. Nonetheless, even if wages are increasing, Johnson's gamble is a risky one. He seems to be betting that a small 1% increase in real wages will outweigh food and fuel shortages. And that's assuming that real wages keep rising. Because if inflation picks up, Johnson will be on the hook for a shortage crisis that he deliberately refused to solve and lower real wages. But what do you think? Is this a good move from Johnson? Is he right that this is a necessary step on the road to higher wages? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.